Capcom has done it again. Resident Evil Requiem is another fantastic entry in the legendary survival horror franchise, delivering a visceral, terrifying, and incredibly immersive experience that feels both fresh and deeply respectful of the series' roots. Before I get into the details of the game, I want to give a little context about where I'm coming from as a fan. I've been playing Resident Evil since the original game on the PlayStation 1, and I've played every mainline title in the series since then. Over the years, I've spent countless hours exploring these worlds, surviving outbreaks, and following the stories of these characters. Because of that history, Resident Evil Requiem hits differently. There are moments in this game that longtime fans will feel in a way that newer players might not fully realize. And that's something Capcom clearly understood when designing this game.
Now I need a good technical analyst on this.
Resident Evil Requiem begins with Grace Ashcroft, an FBI agent investigating a series of mysterious deaths. At first, these deaths seem unrelated, but Grace discovers they all share a single disturbing detail linking them together. That discovery sends her deeper into an investigation that quickly becomes far more dangerous than she expected. At the same time, Leon Kennedy is also on the trail of a man connected to these deaths. But Leon's reasons for pursuing this case is far more personal. It doesn't take long before the two investigations begin to overlap, and Grace and Leon's paths cross early in the story, setting the stage for a much larger mystery that unfolds throughout the game. The setup is simple but effective, and it pulls both characters into a conspiracy that ties deeply into the Resident Evil universe.
Victor, get in.
I don't know.
Well, we should leave.
Grace is a really interesting addition to the Resident Evil cast. Unlike some protagonists in the series who feel immediately confident and battle-hardened, Grace feels genuinely vulnerable. She's clearly dealing with trauma from events earlier in her life, and the voice acting does a fantastic job of communicating that. There's a subtle trembling nervousness in her voice, moments where she hesitates or sounds like she's trying to steady herself before pushing forward. It makes her feel human. And when she walks into dark environments or encounters something horrifying, you can feel that tension in her performance. It adds an emotional layer to the horror that works extremely well. And then there's Leon Kennedy. For longtime fans, it is honestly just great to have Leon back. He feels exactly like the character we remember. Leon is still a man of few words, but when he does speak, it's usually a perfectly timed one-liner.
I think I want a second opinion.
Even in the middle of horrifying situations, he manages to inject just a bit of humor that breaks the tension without ruining the atmosphere. After spending so many years with this character, seeing him again actually hit me emotionally in a few moments. There are certain locations and story beats in the game that call back to earlier Resident Evil titles, and as someone who has been with the series since the beginning, those moments landed hard.
Get some sleep.
There were a couple areas where I honestly got a little choked up. When you've spent decades with these characters and you understand everything they've been through, those callbacks can carry real emotional weight. Capcom handles those moments very respectfully. They never feel forced or overly nostalgic, they feel earned. When it comes to gameplay, Resident Evil Requiem delivers what might be one of the best balances between action and survival horror that the series has had in years. Resources still matter, ammo is limited, healing items are valuable, and sometimes the smartest decision is simply to avoid a fight altogether. But when combat does happen, it is extremely visceral. The game is bloody, brutal, and very detailed in how enemies react to damage. You can shoot legs off, blast out eyes, and watch enemies respond dynamically depending on how you attack them. It makes encounters feel intense and unpredictable, and the enemies themselves are genuinely terrifying. Visually, this may be one of the best looking Resident Evil games Capcom has ever made. The environments are incredibly detailed and atmospheric. Lighting plays a huge role in the tension. The game constantly uses light and shadow to obscure what might be hiding ahead, keeping you on edge every time you enter a new area. small visual details really stand out too. Sweat glistens on characters' skin, environments feel damp and decayed, enemy body damage is rendered with disturbing realism. All of these details combine to create an experience that feels incredibly immersive. Another area where Resident Evil Requiem really shines is its sound design and music. The soundtrack is phenomenal. Some tracks are eerie, haunting, and deeply unsettling, perfectly fitting the slower exploration moments where you're cautiously moving through the dark areas. Other tracks are somber and emotional, supporting some of the heavier story moments involving the characters in their past. And when the action ramps up, the music ramps up with it. During intense encounters and boss fights, the soundtrack shifts into fast-paced, adrenaline-fueled tracks that elevate the tension even further. But just as impressive is the sound design itself.
The cavities of the spine.
Every sound effect hits with incredible clarity. The guns sound powerful and punchy. Creature noises are unsettling and often signal danger before you even see it. You can hear floorboards creaking beneath your feet, distant movement in dark rooms, and even rubble shifting around you as you move through destroyed buildings. It's the kind of game where playing with headphones makes a huge difference. Every little sound feels like it might be a clue or a warning. Progression is handled extremely well. Upgrades feel meaningful and they're paced in a way that keeps you excited about what's coming next. One moment that stands out early in the game is when you receive your first pouch upgrade as Grace. Inventory space is incredibly valuable in survival horror games, so when you finally expand your inventory, it feels genuinely rewarding. It's a small upgrade mechanically, but it makes a big difference. One interesting choice is that Resident Evil Requiem does not include a traditional New Game Plus mode. However, the game still encourages replayability in other ways. On a second playthrough, Leon gains access to weapon purchases and upgrades earlier in the game, which changes how you approach certain encounters. Items also appear to be somewhat randomized. During my second playthrough, I found different consumables in crates and locations where they had previously been something else. That unpredictability keeps repeat playthroughs feeling fresh, and honestly, this is a game where you'll probably want to replay anyway. For longtime fans of the series, I strongly recommend playing the game in Standard Classic mode. This mode brings back the classic Resident Evil typewriter save system, which requires ink ribbons to save your game. It doesn't make the game drastically harder, but it does add a little extra tension because you have to think carefully about when you save. It encourages smarter decisions and adds a layer of classic survival horror strategy. For die-hard Resident Evil fans, it's absolutely the way I recommend playing. Another thing I really appreciate here is the tone. The game takes its subject matter seriously. The story deals with dark themes and terrifying situations, and it treats those moments with the weight they deserve. But at the same time, it still allows for a bit of classic Resident Evil humor and campiness, mostly through Leon's personality and dialogue. Another welcome change is that the story returns more directly to the original Resident Evil storyline and lore. Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village were incredible games, and I have nothing but respect for how they pushed the series forward and introduced new threats. But Resident Evil Requiem feels like a return to the core narrative arc that longtime fans grew up with, and it expands that lore in meaningful ways. Resident Evil Requiem succeeds because it understands exactly what makes this series special. It's atmospheric, immersive, terrifying, emotional, and incredibly satisfying to play. Between Grace Ashcroft's powerful performance, the return of Leon Kennedy, the brutal and visceral combat, the incredible presentation, and the respectful nods to the franchise's history, this game feels like a celebration of everything Resident Evil has become. Capcom has delivered another Resident Evil classic, and it's one that fans will likely want to experience again and again.
You know, I do have a question. When's the last time you brushed your teeth?